We teach this, yet we reward that. We're taught in school to follow the rules, guess what the teacher knows, there's only one right answer, and whatever you do, don't make any mistakes. But if you run that game plan in the real world, if you run that game plan while leading your own libraries, it's a surefire path to mediocrity. Doing exactly the opposite is what allows us all to leave our biggest impact on the world. So when you think about killing creativity and feeding the fear, the opposite, of course, liberates us. WD-40, which I'm sure we all know, but I don't know if you know what it stands for. The name actually stands for Water Displacement 40th Experiment. Could have easily been WD-31. But the cool part about this team is that they realize that more often than not, innovation and creativity doesn't happen as a giant lightning bolt that hits us in our sleep. It happens through a series of setbacks and failures and experiments that ultimately lead to something great. What the team at WD-40 knows, and what we all need to embrace, is that mistakes are not fatal. Mistakes are simply the portals of discovery. There's an old saying that every bullseye is the result of 100 misses. But why don't we teach our kids that? And why don't we run our companies that way? A couple fun things I'll share with you from the research that I did on the book. One of the companies that I interviewed issues a Failure of the Year award each year. So they hold a big banquet, and they celebrate the team member of the year and the project of the year and the failure of the year. So this goes for the team or individual that had a great idea. The numbers made sense, they went for it, didn't work out at all. But good for them. So instead of punishing this, they celebrate failure. Think about the message that drives deep into the DNA of this company. Another company that I interviewed issues every team member 2 corporate get-out-of-jail-free cards each year. Here's what they say. They say, go on a limb, be creative, and if you really screw something up, hand us one of these cards and you're off the hook, no questions asked. On the annual reviews, a team leader will actually be disappointed with a team member if they haven't used both of them. So you say, all right, is that risky? Well, perhaps, but what's the risk of not doing something like this? Irrelevance? Mediocrity? Getting passed by? So many people, so many organizations live their lives trying to play it safe, only to discover that playing it safe has become the riskiest move of all. Take a quick look at this picture and imagine that it's a snapshot from a movie. So something's happening, something's leading up to it, something's about to happen next. And maybe just look at it, not too long, just 5 seconds, raise your hand and let me know what could be going on in this movie. Yes? She's reporting an accident of some kind. Excellent. What's another idea? Yes? She's about to become an accident. So true. Yes, right here. Ooh, someone's following her. Maybe it's like a suspense thriller kind of movie. I like it. Yes?
She's actually supposed to be watching someone else. She's a spy and they're getting away.
Oh, she's the spy. The other folks are getting away. Maybe she's calling in for some backup. I like it. That's a really good one. Yes? Now we're going somewhere. I'm not sure the rating of this film yet. What's one more? Yes, right in the back. Wow, a horror-ish type film in which she closed a window on her dog. Yikes. Yikes. See, I thought you were going to say she was yelling at her kids in the back seat, but yours is much more imaginative. So here's the question. How did you know all that? You were able to make it up. And the reason that this exercise is so easy for us all is that there are no rules, there's no wrong answers, there's no fear of retribution. So your mind becomes alive. Even those folks that walked into this room, arms folded, grumpy, oh, I'm not a creative type. Even if you didn't share something, I know you were thinking it, because that's the way the mind works. Why don't we feel creative? There's a couple big blockers. And if we can understand them, it'll help us conquer them and begin to unleash our own creative capacity. The first one is labeling. For some reason in our society, we attribute job title with levels of creativity. We think musicians are creative and statisticians are not. Meanwhile, there are professional musicians in symphony orchestras, and they play the notes on the page beautifully. They're not creating much of anything, though. They're wonderful technicians, perhaps not all that creative. On the other hand, we've seen how creative accountants can get. All kidding aside, no matter what your job title is, your level of creativity is something that we all share, and it's a muscle that we can all build. The biggest blocker of all, though, is fear. Fear is that insidious force that robs us of our creative juices. And you've all done it. I've done it. You're in a meeting and you have a great idea, but instead of sharing it, you hold it back. You talk yourself out of it, don't you? You say, well, what will my boss think? Or if it was such a good idea, someone else probably would have already said it. What if my idea doesn't work? Will I look foolish? I better just keep my mouth shut. The problem is, if we're building cultures that support fear like that, we're not only robbing individuals the gift of being able to leave their fingerprints on the world, but we're robbing our own organizations of their true potential. Think like a startup. Because startups change things, and startups shake up the status quo. Now, by the way, you don't have to be small to think small. I'll give you an example. A company called ITW. It's a manufacturing firm, 90-plus years of business, $16 billion in revenue. Not exactly a startup. But they think small. Because every time a business unit at ITW reaches $200 million in revenue, they splice it in half. Their theory is that they'd rather have several little $100 million scrappy business units that are nimble and aggressive and creative than one giant, big bureaucratic swamp. Think about the difference between small company thinking and big company thinking. Small companies embrace risk, while big companies tend to avoid it. It's the difference between being urgent and slow moving, creating new ideas versus protecting the old ones. In small companies, ideas bottom up. They come from everywhere. With big company thinking, they're jammed only from the top down. It's the difference between being ideas-centric versus rules-centric, nimble versus bureaucratic, and having a fire in the belly sense of urgency versus becoming complacent.